Hey, welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. My name is Salvador Briggman, and on this show, we really get into the real-world examples of how to raise money successfully using crowdfunding. That could be doing a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo campaign. We're trying to raise money for a new product or invention, a board game, a tabletop, a music project, a band campaign, or even a film or an indie project. If you're trying to raise money to get validation or get the funding you need to move forward, the next step in your journey as a creative type, as an entrepreneur, or as a startup founder, we talk about that on this show. We also get into other forms of crowdfunding like equity crowdfunding on websites like wefunder.com, Republic, Start Engine, etc. And in addition, I think that one of the big components that I've always had, or one of the things I believed in since I got started in the crowdfunding industry in 2012 and since I launched this podcast in 2015, is the idea of putting out valuable, useful information. And whenever I see a gap in that where I feel like there isn't a lot of good information about a topic, I want to fill that gap because I want to demystify this process for you. That's what I'm passionate about, man. And today what I realized was in looking back on these episodes, one of the episodes that really stood out to me was episode number 405. And if you haven't yet, I definitely recommend listening to episode number 405 because we did an interview with Black Sands Entertainment. And this company was able to not only do a successful Kickstarter campaign, not only able to get on Shark Tank, but they also used wefunder.com to raise money for their startup company, and they absolutely crushed it with a Patreon campaign, cashing in on thousands of dollars per month being contributed to them on an ongoing basis, aka residual income, using the powerful subscription-based crowdfunding website, which is known as Patreon. So in today's episode, I want to fill in some gaps when it comes to this tool or this weapon which you can use in order to have residual income as a creator, whether that's being a podcaster, a blogger, a YouTuber, putting out content in terms of comics or other kinds of creativity, in terms of the works you're putting out there. It could be something more art related. It could be even web series related. It could be humor style kind of stuff you're putting out there. Whatever it is, I want to cover that on today's episode by delivering to you a marketing strategy for getting a Patreon campaign out there and some of the key steps that you need to hit in order to raise money using Patreon. Now, you maybe have never heard of Patreon before or subscription-based crowdfunding, but today's episode is really going to help you sink your teeth into that. And in addition, share with you some easy ways to get started if you do want to consider doing a Patreon campaign either now or in the future, or even once you do a form of crowdfunding. So we're getting into that today, but if you want to skip to the finish line and you really just want to get your hands on this right information when it comes to launching a subscription-based crowdfunding campaign, I have a free course that will warm you up to this and also share with you some of the tips and resources, tricks, and tools in order to launch a Patreon campaign tomorrow. So if you want to really get these results quickly, go and check out this free course, which I have for you at the link crowdcrux.com/Patreon course. Again, that link is crowdcrux.com/Patreon course. This is really for you if you want to ethically make an impact on the world. If you want to quit your 9-to-5 job, if you want to go full-time as a creator and turn your passion into profits, one of the ways that you can do that is by having residual income with Patreon, having people supporting you every single month as you're going out there, you're kicking ass, you're taking names, and you're really leading the charge when it comes to your work that you're putting out there online. That link again, if you want to join that free course, is crowdcrux.com/Patreon. Okay, man, let's get into today's podcast episode and discover exactly what you need to do if you're going to be marketing a Patreon campaign, getting patrons, growing this thing from scratch, how you're going to do that, and then we'll share with you a bonus resource as well at the end of this podcast. This is a lecture style episode, so stay tuned. Hope you're going to enjoy it. It's coming up in just a second. Over the past couple of years, Patreon has rapidly risen in popularity to become one of the most popular crowdfunding platforms, right up there with Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and GoFundMe. Thanks to its easy subscription-based model, it's giving creators with multiple projects an opportunity to get funding on a recurring basis. If you've decided to set up a Patreon page to fund your creative work, you'll probably discover that your fans and followers are excited and eager to support you. However, you can't just set up a page and wait for the cash to start flowing in. Building a brand on Patreon requires the use of smart, directed promotional strategies to help you reach an audience big enough to keep funding you. The good news is that tons of creators are already using Patreon successfully for their ventures, and they've proven its efficacy. If you want to hear their insights, definitely check out my book, Tricks for Launching a Successful Patreon Campaign, which is a collection of over 20 interviews I've done with successful Patreon campaign creators. It covers everything from launching your page and getting your first patrons to making enough money to turn your passion into a full-blown career. In this article and podcast, we will go over how to market your Patreon page so you can start building a community of financial supporters that love what you do. Here is our complete guide to Patreon marketing. Number 1, what is Patreon? Founded by musician Jack Stratton of Pompaloose fame, Patreon is currently the most popular subscription-based crowdfunding platform for independent creators of all kinds. Unlike with Kickstarter or Indiegogo, Patreon allows you to get funding for your career as a whole rather than one individual project. This makes it a favorite among people who are trying to make a living as content creators. Though Patreon subscribers are actually called patrons, and they pay a monthly fee to be a part of your page, which includes access to content and other rewards. In return, you get recurring funding for your project from the people that appreciate it the most. Who uses Patreon? Plenty of successful creators have used Patreon to fund their ventures, but it doesn't work for everyone. In order to get the most out of it, you'll need to be able to release a variety of content regularly to your audience to make them keep coming back for more every single month. So inventors, startup founders, and other people definitely have to think about what can we create in order to get people excited. Types of creators who find success most readily on Patreon include podcasters, YouTubers, artists, musicians, adult content creators, comedians, writers, influencers, and bloggers. If you fall into one of these categories, Patreon might be worth a try, especially if you're already having an existing audience who's eager to support you. I have tons of Patreon tutorials that you can check out on my YouTube channel, and setting up a page is easy enough. But how do you get people to subscribe so you can start actually gathering funds? That's where it gets a little bit tricky. Let's take a deep dive and a tried and true look at some of these Patreon marketing best practices. Develop a brand voice. You might not see yourself as a professional marketer, but if you've built up any kind of audience already, chances are there's a reason people want to hear your authentic voice, and you can use that to your advantage. Remember, Patreon promotion is just about talking to your audience, and you probably already know a decent amount about that. You don't have to be salesy if you don't want to and it doesn't suit you. In fact, it's probably better if you're more authentic. People like knowing that their favorite creators are down-to-earth, friendly people. They're likely to be more comfortable contributing to you if they don't feel like you're being disingenuous or trying to take advantage of them in some way. Working on developing an authentic voice in your marketing materials that reflects your brand is critical. In other words, you just got to be yourself. When it comes to developing a brand voice for promoting your Patreon campaign effectively, there's no one-size-fits-all rule. It really depends on who your audience is and why they listen to you. For example, if your content is generally oriented around serious political activism, your brand voice should take on a more serious tone in your marketing materials. On the other hand, if you're an artist who enjoys quirky webcomics, your audience will expect you to crack a couple of jokes every once at every opportunity. If you need help developing your voice as a creator, I do have a free course that's packed with Patreon tips, resources, and strategies, and also killer marketing methods that will include in the description. Once you have your voice, the next step is really to offer exclusive rewards. When you ask someone to contribute to your Patreon page, there's one big question that they will ask. What's in it for me? Your fans appreciate what you do and want to see more of it, but there isn't always enough to compel them to give their extra cash, especially if you're competing with millions of other creators and causes that also want their money. The best way to build a Patreon audience and to get more backers is to offer incentives for subscribing. As with most crowdfunding platforms, rewards are a key element of Patreon. They should be exclusive and relevant to backers. Depending on the nature of your content, possible rewards you can offer might include bonus content, behind-the-scenes footage, early releases, physical merchandise like t-shirts, stickers, CDs, or artwork, live streams, tutorial, and of course, custom content. Remember, if what you are doing is worthwhile, you deserve to be paid for it. So don't be afraid to offer some extra perks to your backers. Create reward tiers. Each member of your audience is likely to be working with a different budget, so it's usually not a good idea to offer blanket subscriptions for everyone. It's better to let your patrons pay what they can afford. That's exactly why Patreon allows creators to set up multiple reward tiers for people to choose from. Some reward tiers might be more expensive than others, but they may offer access to even more content. Others might be less expensive and provide access to a more limited amount of content. This way, no one goes home empty-handed. Everyone gets an opportunity to support you and join the community without breaking the bank. Once you do this, you really got to stick to a schedule. Remember, just because someone joins your Patreon this month doesn't mean you can still count on them next month. You need to give your patrons a reason to keep coming back for more, and that means just putting out more content regularly and reliably. If you go dark for too long, your fans will wonder what they're paying for, and they'll drop out. The best way to avoid this problem is to create a realistic content schedule and stick to it. Be diligent with your work so your fans feel like they're getting their money's worth. It's also important to keep releasing free content for your non-Patreon audience as well. After all, that's how your fans found you in the first place. The high-quality free content will always be the best advertisement for your Patreon campaign. Next, you gotta tease your content. Keeping Patreon content exclusive doesn't mean keeping it a secret. You should let your fans know what they're missing out on. By not becoming a patron of your campaign, they are missing out big. Make sure to hint at what's behind the paywall and tease your exclusive content to get your audience excited about it. Tell them what's available for free. If this portion is only something that's very small and there's going to be so much more once they actually get access to your Patreon campaign, make them know that. Make them know because it's going to create excitement and intrigue for those rewards that you're offering. By the way, if you're serious about turning your passion into profit, you're definitely going to love some of the other resources that I have out there on Patreon. This is one of the easiest times in the history of humanity to be able to cash in on your passion because of the power of the internet and also the ease of delivering content online. If you're worried about the fulfillment and shipping part of your Kickstarter campaign when it comes to getting out all those perks and rewards to your backers, rest assured I've put together a complete Kickstarter fulfillment and shipping checklist for you, and it's free. This is sponsored by the folks at Fulfillrite, and they thought that you should have this checklist as part of your arsenal going into a crowdfunding campaign. If you want to get instant access to this checklist, and it's free, you can go to fulfillrite.com/checklist. Again, that is fulfillrite.com/checklist, fulfillrite.com/checklist. Just go to that link and you can download it immediately. The next step is that you need to reach out to your audience. When it comes to promoting your Patreon effectively, there's one golden rule that always rings true. People can't join your Patreon if they don't know that it exists. You need to spread the word by posting links and promotional content in as many places as possible. Fortunately, this is easier than ever thanks to the internet. And if you have an audience, you know how and where likely to engage people. There are so many Facebook groups, Reddit, social bookmarking websites, social media platforms where you can engage people, and as well, your core marketing channels. So what are some of these best marketing tools or platforms or channels for reaching an audience and advertising your campaign? Let's go through a couple of Patreon promotional ideas that every creator should consider. Social media. Virtually everyone is on at least one social media platform nowadays. That might even be where your audience found you in the first place, and it's a great way for them to learn about your Patreon campaign. Where do you have the largest following in terms of dedicated fans? Go there and begin to tease and post some information about your campaign. Right now, Instagram is one of the top platforms for creators to promote their Patreon pages. Its adaptable algorithm makes you much more likely to reach people with relevant interests, and it focuses on images and video-based content, so it's really easy for you to showcase your work. Put your Patreon link in your bio and be sure to mention it in as many posts as possible without overdoing it. Other notable social media platforms for Patreon would include Twitter, also now known as X.com, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Reddit. There's a massive list and it goes on. Don't forget about email marketing. Never underestimate email marketing. It allows you to get in direct contact with anyone who wants to hear from you. And that makes it one of the most powerful Patreon marketing tools you got. You can't expect all your fans to be browsing social media at the right time to see your updates, but most people do check their email regularly, so they're less likely to miss communications from you that way. Use a service like Lead Pages to create and share landing pages. You can easily collect email addresses from people who are interested. Then you can use a tool like MailChimp, Aweber, ConvertKit to reach those audience members much more directly. Don't give people a chance to forget where you are. Send out communications regularly to keep them updated on your work and their opportunity to support your campaign. Community forums. When building a brand on Patreon, it also helps to have a home-based community where fans can gather together. Not only does this give you an opportunity to share updates with your audience, but it also gives them an opportunity to communicate with one another to discuss their shared interest in your work and build hype for future projects. It partly serves as a way to let your fans do some of the marketing for you as well. Platforms for this include Facebook, aka Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups, Reddit, Discord, and also starting your own online forum in the same way that I have mine, kickstarterforum.org. Collaborations. Want to know a great way to get access to a whole new group of potential fans? Collaborate with another popular creator who makes content similar to yours. People love collaborations because they often result in new and unique creative pieces of work. They also help you to get in front of a new audience. The best part about this marketing strategy is that it's mutually beneficial. You'll have access to their audience and they'll have access to yours, which is often the beginning of a very fruitful partnership. If you ever considered working with another creator or project person, don't be afraid to reach out. Chances are it'll be a great opportunity for both of you. I would also recommend to include calls to action. No matter what channel you're using, your marketing materials should always include a call to action. That could be to check out your link in your profile bio, or it should be to comment or share this post with someone else. You need to tell your audience exactly what you want them to do. And what you want them to do at the end of the day would be to join your Patreon or to consider doing so. Make your ask clearly and explicitly, and let your fans know what they have to gain by joining and becoming one of your patrons. You should also make it easy for them to do this. Don't count on your fans to find your page themselves. Give them a link and explain how they can join. My next tip would be that you gotta say thank you. When someone does something nice for you, the polite thing to do is to say thank you. And this is true on Patreon as well as it comes to real life. Extending a heartfelt shout out to your supporters in a video, social media post, email, or other outreach effort is golden. Please do this. Fans like to feel appreciated, so expressing your gratitude gives them an incentive to continue supporting you. It may also make new fans feel inclined to become patrons too. Lastly, I think that showing gratitude has an incredible karmic cycle, which is one of the areas that we support at CrowdCrux, which is doing great things and put ethically positive things into the world will always come back tenfold. Don't forget to communicate your values. As a final thought, one of the most important functions of your Patreon page and promotional materials is to communicate your values. People like to feel like they're part of something meaningful, and you can facilitate this by using your marketing content to describe your visions and objectives for your projects. Why are your projects important to you? How do they contribute to a larger goal? How will the funding that you get allow you to advance your cause? In other words, your promotional materials should give people a reason to become a part of your community and join your Patreon, but also let them know why their support matters. Make them feel good about where the money is going. In conclusion, if you believe your content is valuable, you can almost certainly promote it on Patreon. Tap into what makes your work worthwhile and speak to your audience on their level, and you're likely to amass a large group of supporters to keep you going. Patreon is taking off, and there are so many strategies and tactics behind the scenes that are working right now in order to launch a Patreon and go from 0 to thousands of supporters on your page. And if you really want to become a Patreon pro and turn your passion into a self-sustaining career, I recommend my free Patreon course for a complete toolkit of easy tricks and tips for Patreon success. It's the best way to learn all the ins and outs of Patreon so you can get the most mileage out of it and give your projects what they deserve. All you got to do is go to link crowdcrux.com/Patreon course and you can learn more about this free course. Lastly, if you would like to see a real-world example of how one creator has transitioned from Kickstarter to Patreon to WeFunder, you got to check out episode number 405, The Secret to Raising $100K in One Day to Self-Publish Your Book, created by Black Sands Entertainment. This creator has done an incredible job on Kickstarter, and they also launched a Patreon campaign, which you can check out as well, that now has over 1,150 paid members to the tune of $12,130 per month in terms of recurring residual income, which is flowing into their creations. A great example, and definitely something that anyone can do who is putting out creative work. Hope you enjoyed this lecture-style podcast, and let's see you take some action. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified Podcast. On this show, on this podcast, we do it all. We dissect many of the different forms of crowdfunding to demystify that so you can understand exactly what you got to do or what you need to do in order to get funding. But more than that, I think the vision is much bigger. If you really want to impact the world ethically for the positive, if you want to make your products worldwide known, if you want to have your work or your art or what you're making be seen by thousands and thousands of people online, I would say today is the greatest time in human history to be able to do that. No longer is it the times where you're going to be an obscure artist. If you actually put your work out there online as an inventor, as a YouTuber, as a podcaster, as a blogger, you can literally have scores of people checking out what it is that you're doing. So one of the things that I love to do is really sharing information to help you get there. And I think that having the right information is so incredibly important, because sometimes when you get your hands on the wrong data or the wrong information, you're led down a path that just kind of makes your life much more difficult. So I've always wanted to speed this up for you. That's really been my goal when it comes to the podcast, showing you success stories, but also the tactics and tools that go into that success. And one of the areas I think that's always challenging is putting out that quality education and information. So I'd say that like 99% of the content I put out there on my YouTube channel, on my podcast, on my blog is free information. But every once in a while, I discover some really cool tactics and tricks that work super well. And I decide to package that information into a guide, which I deliver to you for what I would consider to be a very reasonable investment. So if you want to learn more about this guide that I put together for you, all you got to do is go to the link I'm about to mention. You can check out this guide, and I can share with you really what's working right now when it comes to subscription-based crowdfunding, and of course, in terms of launching a new Patreon campaign. So if you want to check out that, go to crowdcrux.com/Patreon tricks. This is the tricks for launching a successful Patreon campaign. And what's more, they aren't just the tricks that I discovered, but I went over there and actually interviewed over 20 interviews with successful creators, telling with you exactly what's working right now when it comes to Patreon, how to get patrons to your page, how to get patrons to discover you, how do you go from nothing to have people supporting you in the tune of thousands of dollars per month using Patreon. So if you want to check this out, go to crowdcrux.com/Patreon tricks. But I do have to give you that asterisk that it is an investment to get your hands on this premium educational material. Thank you so much. My name is Salvador Briggman. If you do nothing else, take some action towards your goals this week. Don't let time go by. Don't let the enemy of procrastination take hold. Really just plow through those obstacles, push through those milestones, and hopefully at the end of it, you can come on this podcast as another success story. Would love to have you. Again, my name is Salvador Briggman, and I will see you next time.